How's it going, guys? And welcome back into the Celtics Talk Weekly YouTube channel. Guys, the NBA playoffs are right around the corner, and it is a very exciting time to be a Celtics fan. Before we get started here, I just want you guys to go check out all of our social medias in the link down below in the description and follow us there, because we're going to be having you covered all throughout the NBA playoffs. We got podcasts, post-game shows, and in-arena content and interviews that we really are excited about doing and think you guys would enjoy. Please drop a follow, subscribe, turn on post notifications, because it would mean a lot, guys. Now, let's hop into the video. Woo! All right, everybody, welcome back in to yet another Celtics Talk Weekly podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Xavier, the X-Man. Throw it up, my man. And today, we got another good one. We've been pumping out some great content all week long, but today we're answering some of your guys' hot takes and questions you had for us. The little NBA playoffs mailbag here. Not talking everything Celtics. We're going to be kind of diving in to the entire NBA, because when it is playoff time, you kind of got to take a look at everything going on around the league. Xavier, before we get started, I do want to know your picks in the Eastern Conference and in the Western Conference. I want to know what two teams from each conference you like meeting up in the Eastern Conference and Western Conference finals.
Yeah, just blazing take for me. I have the Celtics and the Nuggets. It just seems like it's a collision course. Almost like some wrestling storyline where these two giants are just headed right towards each other. I think for me, the East is far easier. And I'm not just talking about the conference. I'm talking about kind of the matchups. It seems like right now, Boston kind of has a free walk to the conference finals. And Denver, I think stylistically, the teams they're facing could be a little more challenging. The Lakers, they've had immense success against in recent years. They swept them this season in the regular season series. They swept them last year in the playoffs. Some of the games are a bit closer, but I think they just have their number. And I think when you have a team with LeBron and Anthony Davis, they're not going to take that lightly. And I'm not going to say that the Lakers are really going to pose much of a threat. I just feel like it's going to be a little bit closer than last year's series, maybe 5 or 6 games. And then in the second round, they play Phoenix or Minnesota. And I think that matchup in particular can really give Denver fits. I think no team plays Denver better than Minnesota. And I think no team can handle Denver's offensive efficiency like Phoenix, because Phoenix can put the ball in the basket. And I feel like for me, that's where I'm looking. But like I said, it feels like this is one of the more obvious NBA Finals matchups. I'd be pretty surprised if it isn't Boston-Denver.
I love the obviously, I mean, you can tell if you don't know me, and you can tell by the hat, I love the Celtics path as well. Things just got a whole lot easier for this crew with the Jimmy Butler news in that MCL, losing him. I'll be pretty shocked if the Heat make it past Chicago, especially the way Chicago looked the other night against Atlanta. Kobe White and those boys came out firing. I like our first round matchup either or. Second round, you got either Orlando or Cleveland. I think both of those teams, I think with Cleveland, they're a bomb waiting to explode. They're a ticking time bomb. And I think Orlando, they're a solid squad, but they're about 2 years away from really making that like deep playoff push. You could see them in the second round. I don't think they pose much of a threat to us. And then, yeah, I mean, you get to pick. I mean, if Milwaukee can get it done without Giannis in the first round, and you got New York and Philly, who I think are just going to duke it out in the first. And I mean, the path is open in the East for Boston. I think Boston's the juggernaut of that conference. Out West, Denver is going to be a tough team to beat. But I really like what Dallas has given me recently. I think Dallas has really kind of unlocked the Kyrie and Luka tandem, and I've really figured out how to play off of each other. And honestly, I will say this: I have not been high on Luka, Xavier. I think his style of play has screamed James Harden and has screamed you can't win. He's kind of put that aside as of late, and really since the All-Star break, and has kind of done a great job at letting the offense kind of facilitate and flow throughout the game, and not just kind of being a isocentric Luka Doncic show. And I think that's really why they've had a lot of success. They've also been the best defensive team. They have the best defensive net rating since the All-Star break, which I think is just shocking to me that a Luka Doncic team can do that. And when you compare them with Kyrie, those are two below average defenders. So I think Dallas, New York, Denver, and Boston are going to be the final 4 teams. I think Oklahoma could, dabble in there. but I do think those are the 4 best teams in the league right now. I will say, you have not seen a team make back-to-back finals since the Golden State Warriors did it in 2018 and 2019. So as good as Denver is, I really think the tides are starting to shift in the league, and it's not as easy to get back to the finals as it once was when you saw the LeBron and the Warriors just continuing to dominate, and the Lakers and the Celtics in previous years. So obviously injuries can happen. Just, yesterday we would have had a whole different conversation about the Heat and the Celtics, and that conversation is out the window. But for me, yeah, I'm with you on Denver. I'm with you on Boston. I think Dallas, and I think Minnesota too can cause some noise. So I think the West is going to be interesting. Let's get into some hot takes, some mailbag conversation now. I think the big one, a lot of questions we got revolves around that Cleveland Orlando series. One person says Cavs. In no world do the Cavs lose to the Orlando Magic.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. No. So no. Immediately. I don't know who they think Cleveland is. This isn't 2016 anymore. They don't have LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love. I think the thing about this series is these two teams, to me, have like the lowest stock heading into this playoffs out of literally any team making the tournament here. And I think when looking at Orlando, I like what they're doing. I like what they're building. I think Paolo, for me, is a guy that is getting third-team All-NBA consideration. He's kind of right off. In a regular year, I think he would have had it. Just this year, there's so many great individual seasons. But regardless, he's been their main cog on offense. Franz has done a great job knifing to the basket and finishing around the rim. His problem is he can't shoot anymore. His three-point splits have fallen off a cliff. And if he can't shoot anymore, that really bogs down the late game offense, which is what you see with Orlando. Their late game offense is absolutely abysmal, and that has really affected them against good teams. The thing with Orlando is they destroy the likes of like Charlotte and Washington and all these terrible teams in the NBA. They have like nearly an undefeated record against those kind of teams. Their record against 500 teams is not good at all. And when I look at that, a big part of it is that late game offense, because they don't have the ability to go to toe with like a Boston or a Philly or a New York or something like that. Cleveland, this idea that Cleveland is this uber talented team is kind of lost on me, because yes, they have the pieces. I like Darius Garland individually. I like Donovan Mitchell individually. I still like Mobley individually. Jarrett Allen on a right team, I think, has a great purpose. The problem is they can't play together. Their best run came with multiple those guys missing times. Right. And it was just kind of the Mitchell and Allen show. And it looked like the spacing was unlocked with Strus and Dean Wade and all those guys, Sam Merrill. And they had the ability to really space the floor and let Mitchell kind of run him up. But when you put Garland and Mobley back in, it just all of a sudden becomes this kind of slog. And it's this kind of your turn, my turn. The spacing's bad. So, no, Cleveland is not just going to run through this series. I don't like either of these teams. I think this is a true pick-em. I think if I had to choose, I think Orlando knows what they are and they have more of an identity than Cleveland. In a playoff series, I will take that every single time. But, yeah, this idea that Cleveland is just this kind of waiting juggernaut against Orlando. No, it can't get there.
If you were to ask me this question 30 games ago with Cleveland, I would have said Cleveland all the way. But they hit this weird wall, and you make a good point. Maybe it's because they got healthy. And when, you got a team, that's constructed like the Cavs are, where you have these two really ball-dominant ISO guards that are just prolific scorers that are playing on around the wing, and then you have two kind of identical centers. It's like 4 out of your 5 starters kind of play like one another, where Mobley and Allen kind of Mobley and Allen kind of demand the same, spots and workload. And then Garland and Mitchell can play off of each other quite well, but it's a weird guard tandem to kind of have. So I think Cleveland is in this weird spot where offensively they should be almost unguardable. Their spacing, the offensive tools and weapons that they have is really unmatched when you look at, maybe Boston has the similar spacing in offensive talent in the East. But for some reason they can't put the ball in the basket. I think if they can beat Orlando, and I'm taking Orlando in the series, but if they do beat Orlando, it's going to be from defense and experience. I think that's the really one thing they're going to be able to, hang their hat on, is that they've been in the playoffs before, right? Donovan has made a run in the playoffs. Garland in the Cavs made the playoffs last year. Obviously, they fell short and kind of imploded against the Knicks, which I think is what might potentially happen this year again. But I think it's a weird situation in Cleveland. I think you're crazy if you don't think Orlando has a shot in the series. I think they favored it in this series, right? But I don't think it's I don't think it's a runaway Cleveland, Cavaliers show. I really think.
Yeah, no.
I really think with Paolo and Franz and Fultz and Wendell, I mean, Orlando's got a good crew. They've been playing some great ball. If Orlando didn't hit that weird 20-game stretch where they just couldn't put together wins and string together wins, they would have been probably a 2 or 3 seed, because they were pacing for a 50-win year. Paolo, all-star. I mean, the dude put together a phenomenal year in Orlando. So yeah, again, I still like Orlando in that series. Cleveland's got a shot, no doubt, but I think to say there's no world that that Orlando beats Cleveland is crazy. All right, this next one, we're going back to Denver. There isn't a universe where the Nuggets lose 4 games in a 7-game series.
I don't hate that one nearly as much. Here's the thing. So a few years ago, when the Celtics didn't make the finals against Golden State had that first round matchup against Denver. And I feel like it was not talked about because Jokic lost in the first round. He was the MVP. And it was this big debacle that the MVP lost in the first round. But what no one cared to admit was that team was awful. The fact that they were even in the first round was a testament to how good Nikola Jokic was. And the fact that the games were remotely competitive, and I believe they did get a game, is a testament to Nikola Jokic's greatness. And I think the fact that they were running out there with Austin Rivers and Campazzo and all these kind of complimentary guys that you would see at the end of a bench, starting, playing big minutes, going toe-to-toe with Golden State in a lot of these games. Nikola Jokic is a freak, man. He's the best player in the league, and it's not remotely close. So if Denver is healthy, I do find it hard to believe that they would be beaten 4 times. It's just one of those things that it's hard to imagine. It's like kind of when LeBron went on that run with Miami, even when they lost that first finals to Dallas, it was still hard to imagine that big 3 could lose 4 times, but they did. And I think with Denver is, if you're beating them, it's probably in an insanely close 6 or 7 where anything can happen in a game 7. And if you're beating them, Murray has to be pretty terrible. I think that's kind of the recipe. And making Murray play terrible seems like a tough feat, because in the playoffs, he has gone up another level. He's this guy that he's a good team riser. Where most people fall against great teams, Murray's the opposite. He's one of the first guys that looks more comfortable when there's more pressure on him. And I think if they don't have Murray playing at least 8 out of 10 of his capabilities, they're very beatable. But if Murray is being Murray, I don't see it. I don't.
So here's my thing with the Denver Nuggets, right? It really is bringing me back to the Milwaukee Bucks after they won their finals. Giannis is coming off of 2 straight MVPs in a dominant finals performance against the Phoenix Suns, where he won finals MVP. And it felt like they were this juggernaut that was the next dynasty in the NBA, that there was no team and no way that they were losing in 7 games. And then the playoffs roll around, obviously no Chris Middleton, but here come the Boston Celtics, right? Celtics, Bucks, Celtics take them down in 7. And since then, they've been kind of a mess. And I'm not saying the Denver Nuggets are going to be a mess after this year or at all. But what I am saying is that just 2 years ago, Giannis Antetokounmpo was the proclaimed, no doubt, no question, best player in the NBA, in the universe, in the world, right? He was the guy. And there was no guy in the league that was touching Giannis. And then the following year, he wasn't. And it was Curry. And no one was touching Curry. And then the following year, now it's Jokic, where it's all right, no one's touching Jokic. And I do think on principle, they're right? It's tough to beat the defending champs 4 times out of 7. It's a tough task. And I don't really see many teams that can. But I will say this. I think we live in a basketball world that is very, very, what can you give me right now? And right now is the Denver Nuggets. And, they're the reigning champs. So I personally think the Denver Nuggets are a lot more beatable than people make them out to be. I think that they, went on a championship run last year. But to say that no team can beat them 4 times out of 7 games when really all they've done is put together one run isn't fair to the rest of those teams, like the Timberwolves, like the Thunder, these teams that, like Dallas, these teams that can really, really have put together a phenomenal year, have played some great defense, some great ball. And I don't know, I'm not sold on it. I don't see Denver getting back to the finals again. I could be wrong on this, and I'll take it with my chest if I am. But I mean, I remember word for word, I remember these exact words said about Giannis just 2 years ago, and it feels like the same thing to me.
I think the difference for me is when Giannis won that title, it felt like the stars aligned a little bit. Everyone talks about the KD foot on the line. And then in the finals as well, Chris Paul was a shell of himself. And Booker kind of deteriorated towards the end of that series. They were down 2-0 in the finals as well. So they had to come back to win that title. I think the difference with Denver is they kind of took it. And I think their only quote unquote break was the fact that Jason Tatum twisted his ankle in Game 7, and they faced Miami in the finals. And by then, it felt like a foregone conclusion. Denver was going to be crowned the champions. My thing with that question is, to me personally, Jokic has been the best player for a few years now, regardless of who's won the title. I've been kind of in that camp, and I can only conceivably see 2 teams beating a healthy Denver. Me personally. And that's Minnesota, if everything goes right for them and their late game offense can execute at a passable level, because their late game offense has also been terrible, or Boston. Because I think Boston is the most talented team in the league by a good margin, but they're not the smartest team in the league by any means. And I think their coaching can also handicap them in certain situations. And I feel like that, to me, would be my pause if the 2 teams squared off against each other. And then Minnesota, they just have the size and kind of the moxie to challenge Denver, or I think other teams, I'm not saying they don't have the confidence to. I just feel like Minnesota, in a way, has just this unrivaled charisma where they don't really care who they're against. They think they're the better team, and that's because of Anthony Edwards and his confidence that he exudes.
Well, I will say, when I think the team in this is a big thing that came up in the mailbag was I think a big thing around the basketball community, I want to say, is a lot of people think Minnesota's getting bounced in round 1. And partly because, Phoenix got the better of them 3 times in the season series. But again, it's like, if you look, and this is what's frustrating to me, because last year you saw the Heat and the Lakers put together these play-in runs, right? And really, if you look at the context of those runs, the stars aligned, right? Kind of like with the Bucks that one year. And you need luck to win a ring, right? Any championship ever has had some sort of luck to get them to the ring. But if you look at their path, right? The Lakers, they played, a depleted interior force of Memphis with Adams and Clark out. And, the Lakers are dominate you in the paint if you aren't healthy, especially when your 2 starting bigs are out. And then they played a Warriors team that was, they were waiting to explode, dude. They shouldn't have. They beat the Kings off experience alone. And you flip it on the other end, they got waxed by the Nuggets, right? A close 4-game series, but a sweep is a sweep. You couldn't get one. And you look at Miami, where it was like, all right, Miami played an injured Bucks team, right, where Jimmy Butler was unconscious. Credit to Jimmy Butler, but no Giannis for games 2, 3, and 4, or came back 4. You played a Knicks team that
half the available minutes in that entire series.
Right. Then you play a Knicks team that really had no business being there. They were also banged up. And then you played a Celtics team that just was beating themselves, right? The Miami Heat, the fact the Celtics even brought that series to 7 was pathetic. The Miami should have had that taken care of in 4 or 5. So I think it developed this narrative, right, that the regular season doesn't matter, and that, a team could walk into the play-in and run through no seed under the 5 seed has ever made the NBA Finals, other than last year, right? It was the Miami Heat, the first 8 seed. The Suns have been a disaster all year. They've been a disaster. So it's like, I'm not letting a team that has shown me nothing in the regular season that they can keep up with a top team in the West. And Minnesota is a top team in the West, in my opinion.
I think my thing with that series is I just think it's the doomsday draw for Minnesota, because if I'm Minnesota, I'm thinking, okay, the best team in the league is Denver. The toughest matchup for us is Phoenix. We have to play Phoenix in the first round, and if we win, we have to play Denver. So to me, that's my hesitation with Minnesota. And I love Minnesota as well. I just think Phoenix matchup wise is such a disaster because of the scoring element and the late game execution. Because Phoenix also has some of the worst fourth quarter numbers. It's almost inconceivable how a team with Bradley Beal half the time, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker can be so bad in the fourth quarter, but they are. And Durant, particularly in the last few minutes, has been really bad. But you have to assume in a playoff series that at least Booker can kind of get it going late. And you mentioned the season series sweep in favor of Phoenix and the scoring ability, where sometimes Minnesota just goes cold despite their awesome defensive ability. And to me, I am picking Phoenix as well in an upset. I'd say in 6 or 7. But if Minnesota can get past them, I think they can seriously give Denver a run for their money. It's just, can they get past Phoenix? It's kind of tough because if Minnesota was against anyone else, I feel like I'd be much more confident in saying they could give Denver a better series. But if they have to exude a ton of energy in the first round just to get past Phoenix, then I'm much more worried.
Right. Well, here's my thing with Phoenix in the playoffs is what KD are you going to get? Because if you get the Kevin Durant that was tearing up the league in the years 2017 to 2018, 19, right? Those years, then they're almost unguardable, right? Especially if Booker is doing the Booker thing, and then you dabble in Beal's 19 to 24, he's going to get you. But I'm not sold that you're going to see that Kevin Durant, especially with the Minnesota defense. I mean, that defense is so suffocating, man. You got McDaniels out there. Edwards is just a dog. And then you got Gobert manning the paint. I will say on the flip side, Gobert has not had playoff success nearly any year. You've kind of seen him be a liability on the bench at times. But here's my thing. Even with Gobert on the bench, I still think that team is better off in the playoffs because of Naz Reid off the bench. I think that lineup, when it's Edwards, Conley, McDaniels, Naz Reid, and Karl Anthony Towns, is one of the scariest lineups in the NBA. Because they can offensively attack you from 4 out of the 5 directions. And defensively, I mean, they are going to be tough to go at. I mean, what they got going for them is defense. And if they're executing, forget it. I mean, they're a tough team to beat. I mean, if they're executing down the stretch consistently, they might be just the favorites out of the West because of just how suffocating. I mean, it's impossible, especially if you're an isocentric team like the Phoenix Suns are. It's near. I mean, we watched it 2 times as Celtics fans this year. It's almost impossible to get them. I mean, it took a Jason Tatum near 50 bomb to beat him in overtime. And I don't take that lightly. For this Celtics team is a tough team to beat once, forget twice in the regular season, unless you're the Denver Nuggets. So, that series. And again, I made a playoff prediction yesterday, Xavier. I didn't have a single sweep because I don't think there's a sweep this year. And maybe maybe I'm putting that out there. That's my hot take of the podcast, my mailbag. I don't think there's a single sweep.
I think the league is in a good place, and I think your point about the 8 seed. So we've only seen 2 8 seeds make the finals. It was the Knicks in '99. That was a lockout season, and then the Heat this past year, the first in a regular season. I think I'm not going to say it's going to become more normal, but I think the balance of talent in the league is much more spread out than it used to be. I think this is probably the most talented time in league history, and old heads are going to complain about that one, but I don't really care. It's my opinion. And I could definitely see if the standings are jumbled up, like that 5 or 6 seed making a run. I still think the regular season is uber important. And I'm always going to default to the top teams because they showed me that what they're capable of. And most of the times they have these superstars at the top, a la Jason Tatum, Nikola Jokic in both conferences. So, yeah, my thing with Minnesota is I think they're a little over-reliant on Mike Conley being the table setter for them, particularly late. and he's A, old, and B, rather injury prone at this point. But yeah, I think it'd be a great series. We talked about it. Both games went to overtime, and they were both like actual classics, some of the best games all season long. And I'd love to see those two teams square off. I just feel like it's kind of doomsday scenario for Minnesota, and I wish they got an easier draw. That's all.
Right. Right. Yeah. Phoenix. I mean, man, they better if they don't do it this year, or make a run. I don't know what they're gonna do because that could be a disaster class, in the makings. Now, next one up here is, I'm not gonna name drop either. We're going to a whole podcast without name dropping who these hot takes are. So, Mavs aren't passing the Clippers in round one. In this one, all right, I'm going to start us off here because obviously I got Dallas making the NBA Finals, which is I don't understand, a hot take, to kind of an obscure pick. Luka Doncic loves playing the LA Clippers.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about it, and I will say, man, Luka is in year 6 right now. He's due for kind of a playoff run, and I will say the Clippers looked really great when they were all, healthy, energized back in December and midway through January, and then they kind of lost their spark that they had going. I think it's going to come down to Luka Doncic versus Kawhi Leonard, and I will say Kawhi is still probably one of the scarier playoff performers. He had a phenomenal playoff last year in those first 3 games before he went down and got hurt, against Phoenix. So I will say I'm picking the best player in that series, and the best player in that series, I'm sorry, I know what Kawhi has done. It's Luka Doncic.
So I agree with the hot take. I also have the Clippers here, and I understand all the evidence against it. The fact that Kawhi can't stay healthy in a playoff series, the fact that Luka Doncic just goes up a level against the Clippers. I feel like for me, and this happens every year, and it's kind of hard because a few teams do it, but this is like an NBA law. Teams that play really well for like the last month of the season do not do as well as people think they do. It's kind of this like late peak thing. Everyone picks them as a trendy, playoff team to go deep. And almost every single time they fall flat on their face. And there's a few evidences of that this season. And it's kind of hard to pick which team is it going to be. Is it going to be the Knicks, who's had this miraculous like 2-month stretch, got all the way up to the 2 seed? Is it going to be the Thunder, who actually secured the 1 seed in the West, and they've been more consistent throughout the entire season, but they were able to stave off Denver, which I think a lot of people weren't expecting? Or is it going to be Dallas, who, again, the last 2 months, it seems like everything's been clicking for them after the All-Star break? And of those teams, to me, Dallas is the best fit for my criteria for a team that might fall on their face when they go to the playoffs. Look, they don't have home court, not that Clippers home court is much to brag about, but regardless. And I think looking at this Clippers team, they have so many guys who are either really good in the playoffs or really terrible in the playoffs. And I think if it just averages out, their team is so talented. And I'm looking beyond like the past talent of a guy like James Harden or Russell Westbrook. But I'm just looking at a guy like Norm Powell off the bench, who I think has been so important. He's played both roles for them, starting and coming off the bench this season. And he's been phenomenal. And I think Paul George, he's probably going to make 3rd-team All-NBA. Kawhi Leonard's probably going to make 2nd-team All-NBA. Just those guys in a playoff series, if they're healthy, I find it hard to believe that Dallas is going to be able to match that firepower, regardless with how good Luka has looked against these guys. Because for a lot of it, one of those guys has either been banged up, or it was the bubble, or something just kind of weird happened. I feel like if they're healthy, I'm still picking them. Now, do I think it'll last? No, I have them out, I think, like the next round or something like that. But to me, the Clippers have a lot of playoff risers, and that bodes well. And like you said, Luka hasn't really had that like signature playoff run.
Right.
And to me, it's one of those like, you got to prove it to me, because the heliocentric guys struggle in the playoffs. It's just how it is.
No doubt.
Kyrie's last playoff moment was when I was in middle school. So to me, that kind of matters. I'm a senior graduating college right now. So I just want to see it with Dallas, because I really don't trust them. I feel like a lot of stuff went well for them at a good time, and they're going in with confidence. But as I mentioned, that doesn't necessarily bode well to playoff success.
Well, let me ask you this then.
Yeah.
Clippers got some guys. I will disagree with you on this. They got some guys that have disappeared in the playoffs.
Oh yeah, Harden, Westbrook.
Harden.
Yeah,
I
sure.
mean, Paul George has some a shaky track
He's
record.
been up and down. Yeah.
So, do you trust those guys more than what you trust in Dallas? You think you still, despite what their record says, you still trust them more?
Here's my thing with Harden. He's been okay in the playoffs when he's had no pressure. So I feel like a first-round series against Dallas, he'll be fine. Same with Russ. I feel like Harden disappears when it's like the second round and you really need to win this game, or it's the conference finals and you're like, oh, the finals are on the horizon. There's a reason he hasn't made the finals as the cog of a team. He made it as a sixth man with Oklahoma City. And same with Westbrook. There's a reason he hasn't done it since that season, like 2012 with the Thunder. And no, I don't trust them at all. But again, in the first round where I don't really trust anyone, I'm going to kind of default to those guys I've at least seen. Like last year, for example, Harden's one of the worst playoff guys in NBA history late in rounds. But he looked good in the first round, and he looked decent in the second round for the first few games against Boston. When the pressure builds 5, 6, 7, that's when Harden disappears, and it happened again. So if it goes 7, am I a little bit worried? Yes. But at the same time, he seems to, need to feel a little pressure before he finally collapses.
I will say this about James. Last year, he won that Sixers team 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, I mean, 40 points in 3 of their wins. So he was paced. I mean, before just a horrific game 7. I mean, the game 7 was bad, but so was Embiid's, right? I mean, and so wasn't Doc Rivers. So I will say this. I got it going 7, right? No doubt. I think it's just going to come down to that game 7. And I think if Luka Doncic comes out firing in game 7, forget it. Because I don't think they have the firepower to match just the Luka show. Because when the Luka show is going, it's just, especially in the first round, right? Once your legs kind of start going and the Western Conference Finals show up and the teams get better and the defense is better and each possession, you can't really afford a step back 3 is when I'm going to lose trust in Luka, even though I got him going pretty far. It's that first round matchup. I think their legs are fresh. I think the risk versus reward favors them. So that's going to be an interesting series. I personally think that's the best first round matchup we have.
I agree. And I think the winner
do.
of that has a serious chance of making the Western Conference Finals. I think the caveat would be if the Clippers experience some health difficulties, but I feel like they have a serious chance to knock off Oklahoma City.
Well, in that brings me to my next hot take is that the Oklahoma City Thunder are not ready, not their time. I don't even think this is a hot take. I think I think what OKC did this year was phenomenal. They've checked every box they needed to. They got ascending stars in Jalen Williams and Chet and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Dagnall won Coach of the Year, and they're the 1 seed. And I think whatever they do past the first round is house money. And quite frankly, I will say this, though, those are the scariest teams. If they understand that there's no expectations and they're playing with house money, then they could go on a real run. I will just say, man, they're the youngest team in the NBA, the youngest team ever to get the 1st seed. I mean, at some point, that roadblock's going to hit where you just haven't been in that situation before, and the moment just gets a little too big for you.
I think late in games, they default to SGA a little bit too much, and he's honestly my favorite non-Celtics player. I love SGA. I love his game. I love what he's been able to do. And his driving to the basket stats are unbelievable. He gets to the cup at a ridiculous rate. And I like J-Dub. I think his ability to kind of be this Kawhi Leonard light is really special. I think he's a guy that has serious All-NBA futures ahead of him. Chet has had an awesome, quote-unquote, rookie season. And I like a lot of their complementary pieces. Isaiah Joe is a guy that I think can fill it up when he needs to. Jay Will, the other Jalen Williams, has shown some moments of competence here. My thing with Oklahoma City is, besides defaulting to SGA too much late, they've never been there before. They don't have another complementary big. Their big, trade deadline acquisition was Gordon Hayward, who's barely played for them, and he hasn't looked particularly good when he has been on the floor. And I just don't think when things get bottled down and it's just SGA and the occasional J-Dub sprinkled in, that's going to be enough. I think they're probably like a really top tier talent short, and I think they're another like good above average big man depth short as well. I don't know who that guy could be. I thought they would for sure go after Daniel Gafford. I don't really know if they just didn't want to deal with that and they wanted to look towards this offseason to correct that hole. But it's such a massive issue for this team. It's kind of unplausible that they didn't just try to go for it in a smaller way. But I feel like this team is built 2 years from now. And I hear what everyone's saying as far as like, this is the team of the future. And I get when people say that. But Boston's not going away. Denver's not going away. Minnesota has the ability to move off Cat and kind of retool and upgrade that Cat position. And Cat's a great player, but I just don't think he fits this current iteration of the team. So they're not really going away, and they have moves to make. And that's just not even talking about like other potential teams on the horizon. What if New York is able to land another big star? What if Philly is able to land that third guy that they've been preaching for some time now? What if Orlando is somehow able to land a disgruntled star and Franz learns how to shoot again and it's Paulo Franz and another guy? Like, you have to take advantage of what's in front of you. And I understand Oklahoma City is so young, but I'm telling you right now, if they made some better midseason acquisitions, I think we'd think about this team a little bit differently than we do right now because they do feel a little bit thin and they do feel a little bit small. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have a good future. I just feel like
not at all.
It's always important to speed up the timeline because I feel like future it's one of these things in the NBA where everything's about the future, right? We have future cap space, we have future draft capital.
Right.
But if you look through the history of the league, it doesn't work out nearly as much as people care to think. Kind of like that late playoff run that I was talking about earlier. There's a lot of these kind of NBA misconceptions, and that's one of them. And I understand the treasure trove of picks they have and the cap space, which they'll have to re-sign the stars, so that one's not as important. But regardless, if they're able to do something in the offseason, I think next year is their time. I don't think it's as far away as maybe I just kind of made it out to be. But this year, I think it's a little bit too early, and I don't think it broke the way they really wanted it to.
I think Oklahoma has the utmost luxury moving forward of sitting still and being there or having the tools and the assets to make a splash in still being there. I don't think there's a direction they can go that is the wrong direction. I think they have the core in 3 years to hoist that NBA championship trophy. Shai, I think, is that dude. I think Chet is a great second or third option on a championship team. Or we'll get there, at least not right now. Jalen Williams, I think, has ascended into this all-star pedigree where I will have future all-NBA appearances, in my opinion. So I really think they're set up for success, not just this year. I think there's some things they could have made. I think the Gordon Hayward move was your kind of a name move where it's like, oh, Gordon Hayward's a vet and he's played in some playoff games. That would make sense where it really it was a decent acquisition, but what is he really going to do? He doesn't really see the court much. And at this point of his career, he's kind of a liability. So yeah, I think whatever Oklahoma City does this year is a positive. I think they've already obviously got to get out of the first round. Don't want to lose the 8th seed. But after that, I mean, I think you're just going to run into some teams where it's like it's their time, right? I think Boston, we ran into that situation too a couple of times where it's just the other team's time. It's not yours. It's like, the finals. It was kind of Curry's time to get his last one and for that dynasty to fizzle out. And Boston would back this year, and that brings me to the next one. It's kind of plain and simple. It's a question, and it's the biggest question for this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Will the Celtics win the finals this year? And I think it's like, you ask me, I got to say yes. I have to say yes, right? I have covered the Celtics now for 3 years. I am one of the biggest Celtics fans you'll meet. I have to say yes. I'm going to put, all of my chips on green this year. I will say this. If they don't, it was an ultimate failure I mean, if they don't do it this year, then I don't know if they'll ever do it. And I get it. I mean, there's been some examples where the Miami Heat Big Three didn't win their first year and then they got it back. So maybe I should retract that statement. But the Eastern Conference is as weak as it will be.
Mm-hmm.
You got Jimmy Butler, who has now not the one worry, I put in air quotes because I didn't think it was a real worry, but the one worry you might see was Jimmy Butler bangs you up in that Miami Heat team in the first round. You have a clear-cut path to the finals. You should have fresh legs. You should be able to, pick and choose when you can need Kristaps. Will they? They should. Will they is the question. If they see Denver, I think this question gets a lot trickier because the Boston's like their weakness, right? It's if they're like a juggernaut or a villain, right? And you got their weaknesses, right? They got one weakness, and it's keep the game close for the fourth quarter. If you can keep the game within a puncher's chance by that fourth quarter, you got a good chance to beat the Celtics. Because if it's a one possession game with less than a minute, I like the other team's odds. And I will say that's a huge flaw in a championship team. If not executing is really what can kill you. And that's partially why the Denver Nuggets last year won the finals, was because that series against the Lakers, they executed every single game. They executed. And I think Boston, it's tough to get them in that situation where you can execute against them from how dominant they are. I mean, what do they have, more 20-point wins than 30-point losses this year? I mean, or 20-point wins than 10-point losses this year. Excuse me. So will they win? I'm going to say yes. They're my pick. I think that Tatum, it's his time, right? You talk about timing. It's Tatum's time. It's Brown's time. They have, I think, every tool they need. And I know we harp on Mazzulla on this podcast, but the staff, they have the staff. Charles Lee's a future head coach of the Charlotte Hornets. You got Sam Cassell, who really should not be an assistant. He should be a head coach. I think Mazzulla has a year under his belt. He wants to win. They got experience. They got talent. They got defense. They're the whole package. They should win the finals this year, Xavier. They should.
So this is such a loaded question. I'll try to do my best. So statistically, just looking at the overview of this team, there's not really a team like Boston that hasn't won the title. The closest things that you can point to are the 73-9 Warriors, which took Draymond being a fool, getting suspended, and kind of losing the momentum of a series that should have been really over. And Cleveland pulling off one of the greatest upsets in sports history, that 3-1 comeback. And then the 72 Celtics, which won 68 games, and I believe they lost to the Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals in 7. And besides that, it's like the other 10, 12 teams that look like this Boston Celtics team on paper have all won the title. So there's that. There's like very good historical suggestions that, like, yeah, this team's winning the title, and they're going to do it relatively comfortably. Eye test wise, it's a little more concerning because late game offense, not only is it bad, it looks terrible. And the reason it looks terrible is because it becomes iso ball. It becomes just boggled down mess where no one moves around. It's Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, the moniker I always use, dribbling the air out of the basketball. And it looks like something that teams want to happen and enjoy happening because it loses all the momentum for Boston when inevitably either of those guys takes a bad shot and usually misses because, again, it is a bad shot. Will they win the finals? If Joe Mazzulla is to be believed and this team is focused, they're having some of the toughest practices they've had all year long, ramping up for these playoffs. They're saving these bag of tricks to use. They didn't want to use everything in the regular season. He said it a few times. Do I believe him? I'm not sure. But it has been this constant thing throughout the year. We're trying stuff out. We're seeing what works. We're not really too worried about the result. We're up in the standings by so much. We're just trying to figure out how to tool this team up for the playoffs. If he does have this master plan where this team plays the style of basketball where KP's getting post touches, the ball's moving at a lightning fast pace, Tatum is not the only ball handler. Drew's getting some. Derek White's getting some. They're not taking stupid shots in transition. They're able to understand that, look, the threes aren't going in. Let's give Tatum some touches on the little block, or let's attack the rim with pick and roll with Porzingis. If that's the team we're getting, yeah, they're winning the championship. And whether it's 6 or 7 against Denver, they're beating them. If any of that falls significantly short, which it has at plenty of points during the regular season, whether that's the late game offense has fallen apart, whether that's Kristaps Porzingis is just a 3-point sniper like a Shane Battier or Mike Miller, if that is Jason Tatum is taking over the ball too much and you're not letting Drew Holiday or Derek White kind of get those freebies attacking the basket, if it's they're shooting 48 threes, but only, 8 went in, and they haven't figured out that the law of averages is not working tonight. We have to attack the rim. If any of that falls significantly short, no, they're not winning the title. And people don't want to hear that, but it's the truth. Now, if I have to answer the question,
drum roll,
I guess they're winning the title. I know people don't. I think my reserve is I don't think the playoff moniker that they've gotten, the playoff chokers, these Boston Celtics, is deserved. Because I think 22 is house money. The fact they turned that season around was unbelievable.
Right.
And
No
they
question.
had a lead in that finals. And I think Curry leaves his body in TD Garden and draws that series even, and they never look back. But I feel like if they're just able to somehow withstand that, they win the title. And it's Steph Curry. He's the top 12 player of all time. That stuff happens, right? But again, that was ahead of schedule for the Celtics team. People don't want to think about it like that. But if you look at the history of the NBA, and when the Pantheon guys win their first title, they're 26, 27, 28, even later than that, years old. It's not supposed to happen when you're 24. That doesn't happen. Right. I know people want to think it does, but it doesn't. So Boston's right on track where they're supposed to be right now, being the title favorites with these guys at the age they are, 26, 25. And even last season, they go down 3-0. That should never happen. Jaylen Brown was horrendous in that series, and that's an understatement. It's one of the worst performances I've ever seen from an All-NBA player in a conference finals. Caleb Martin thoroughly outplayed him. And even then, they had a chance in Game 7. They forced the Game 7 in TD Garden.
And if Tatum doesn't go down, goes
down, and who knows, maybe they still would have lost, but it doesn't matter. The fact that you got one of the biggest poo-poo platters of all time from your second best player, and you still had a chance to make the finals, is indicative of how good this team is. Now you add Drew Holiday, who's an all-star like 14 months ago. You add a better version of Derek White, a more comfortable version of Derek White. You have Jaylen Brown with more confidence and seemingly, and I want to put a pin in this, the ability to dribble with both hands consistently and not bounce the ball off his foot. You add Kristaps Porzingis as a weapon down low. You add all these things. And if last year you got probably, if it's a scale of 1 out of 10, you got a 2 effort from the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, and they forced a Game 7, imagine what a 6 is. You know what I mean? Imagine what a 7 is. And they have the ability to rise and play their best basketball now. And that's what gives me at least a little bit of confidence, is that it can't get worse. They added better players on top of that, and the East is seemingly a little bit easier than it was last year. I'm still a little bit concerned with Milwaukee because I think regardless of how terrible they've looked, and they've looked awful, and regardless how much of a goof Doc Rivers is at the helm, they still have Giannis Antetokounmpo in a 7-game series. There's no reason he can't win at least 1 or 2 games by himself. And we've seen in the playoffs plenty of times these role players, especially the last few years, have been able to step up. So I have pause in them. New York just muddling it up. I'm not necessarily scared of New York from a talent perspective. More so, they're just so physical. And I feel like Boston is more physical than people give them credit for. But injury perspective, as far as like Kristaps, he's been healthy all year.
Right.
What happens if Mitchell Robinson bangs him up? Drew Holiday's had some injury history in the past. What happens if he gets a little too scrappy with Jalen Brunson? So there's that. So I'm not going to act like it's just the easiest path ever, because I don't think it is. But I feel like everything is setting up for Boston to at least make the conference finals. And once they're there, as long as they don't play the absolute worst version of them, there's literally no way they don't make the finals. And yeah, long answer short, I think they're winning the title as long as they play 85% of what they're capable of. Unfortunately, we've seen them time and time again not do that. But if any team is going to be able to do that this year, and any team is going to be able to beat Denver and just play 85, 90% of their style, it's going to be Boston. And I'm confident
that these guys want this title more than anything else and that they can get it done.
Well, it's funny because that was a great point earlier you made about playoff chokers. How did these playoff chokers really come to be, right? Let's look at it. 2022. Do not count 2018, 2019, 2020, right? You had a rookie Jason Tatum, a second-year Jaylen Brown, Kyrie Irving that imploded the franchise, and then a third-year bubble year that the Heat were just, right? The Heat were just a better team. Those don't count, right? You're supposed to be missing the playoffs in the first 3 years. Forget making the conference finals. I'm looking at the past 2 years, 2022, 2022, 2023. Jeez. 2022, you make a great point. That they had no business making the NBA finals that year. Zero business, let alone winning it. They were 18-21 at a point in the year and had to exude all of their energy just to get themselves into the top 3 in the Eastern Conference, right? And then they play these just rigorous 4 games against the Brooklyn Nets that are coming down to the wire every single game. Then they play a rigorous 7-game series against the Milwaukee Bucks that was pretty much like a back and forth. I mean, and then Grant Williams goes unconscious game 7, and Jason Tatum, shows who he is in game 6. And then they play another 7-game series against Miami. So let's just look at that, right? From January 21st to June 1st, they are playing and exuding every ounce of energy they have to, 1, get themselves back into the playoffs, and then in 2, to get past these other juggernaut teams that the Eastern Conference had. So they get to the NBA Finals, they're up 2-1, and then, like you said, Steph Curry has not had a body experience, and you lost to a top 12 player. Happens, right? You were so tired, you were so beat up, and you were so exhausted from obviously the situation they put themselves in midseason to get back to the higher seed and to the NBA Finals that, listen, you lost one. And then let's look at last year, right? We were fools to think they were going to win a finals last year. I mean, the second you lose your head coach a day before training camp is a season that should not work out. And then let alone that, you lose Robert Williams for 41 games. So this team has a rookie head coach, period, not NBA head coach, a rookie head coach, period, and end of sentence. You got an injured Robert Williams and a bench that you're way over your head think is going to work. The fact that they were a game away from making the NBA Finals is bonkers to me. The fact that they were able to get the home, the Heat should have sent them home, right? Like, they did send them home. They should have sent them packing in 4. So I said this in a post-game show. I think it was against New Orleans. I think it was you and Franco. They are going to be there no matter what. They have proved now for 6-7 years that if you want to get to the finals, you got to go through Boston. That even if they're playing at 60%, 70%, I agree, they're going to be in a game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals with a shot at home to make the NBA Finals, right? The bare minimum. You can call me nuts, but that's the bare minimum with this team. And, it's their time, right? It's their time. And you look at the trajectory of an NBA player, and LeBron said this in the JJ Redick and LeBron podcast. Tatum has accomplished so much success in the 6 years that, right? This is year 7, in the 7 years of his career. And he gets hated on for it. It's not a pat on the back that this dude in 6 years has accomplished more than almost any other NBA superstar has in terms of playoff success before the age of 26. No, it's playoff choker. No, he doesn't show up in big moments, which is blasphemy to me to even think of Jason Tatum as a playoff choker. Because quite frankly, all the evidence I have, Xavier, suggests that Jason Tatum, believe it or not, has actually been one of the better playoff performers in the recent 10-year history of the NBA. So I do think
he is.
Right. I mean, he is. And I will say this with the Celtics. If they don't beat themselves 3 times in a series, right? Because a team will get one because they're the better team, or not the better team, but they're going to get a game. If they don't beat themselves 2 or 3 times in a 7-game series, then they will cakewalk to the finals. Cakewalk. I mean, I'm serious. They will win in 4 games in the first round, 5 games in the second rounds, and maybe 5 games again in the Eastern Conference Finals, depending on who they see. That's how good this team is. Again, the question is Denver. The question is Jason Tatum for me. He's had an up and down shaky year. How much of a rhythm is this guy going to be in? If this guy's in a rhythm, forget it. There's no shot you beat these guys. If Jason Tatum's clicking, you just need one of the other 4 guys to be on that night to win the game. So I this question, maybe it's a trick, maybe I'm jinxing it, maybe I'm putting all my eggs in a basket, but they have given me every reason this year in the past 6 years to think that they will be there. They will have a puncher's chance, even if they're playing their worst basketball. And I really like that point you made. And I'm happy you said that, because the playoff choker narrative is such bullshit and is so not true. Because if you really look at the evidence, the Celtics have zero reason to already have a championship. If they did, they would be way ahead of schedule, and you would be talking about Jason Tatum as potentially one of the next guys of like you talk about, Kareem gave the baton to Bird, and Bird and Magic gave it to Jordan, then Jordan gave it to Kobe, and then Kobe and Duncan shared it and gave it to LeBron and Curry. If Tatum already has one, is handing the baton to Jason Tatum. So again, we'll see. And it's time will tell. We're at the playoffs. There's no more waiting, right? The time is now for the Boston Celtics. So again, this was yet another fun show that we got to do. It was a good podcast. Some good takes, some good hot takes, some good questions. If you guys did submit a question or a hot take, I appreciate it. I appreciate the support we've been getting growing immensely on this show and podcast. Xavier, I do want to give you the opportunity to talk about what's coming back and what you're operating to behind the scenes outside of the Celtics Talk Weekly, because I did see that you boys are back in operating.
Yeah, so the Sports Wave is back. It's a company I created in 2018. We're just trying to change the way how, younger people do media. And that goes beyond the Celtics, of course. We're big football, basketball guys. And whether that's writing articles, because it's tough for these young guys to break in to the industry. And we're just trying to change the ability to have kids get writing reps and help them, whether you're in college, whether you're in high school or post, whatever it is, just get stuff for your resume, for your portfolio. We'll help you out. And it's a great community. And we thought we'd lose it, but we were able to scrape some stuff up together, and we are back. So we'll be having our own podcast, our own stuff like that. So we're excited for that. So make sure to check that out. I'm also a writer for Hardwood Houdini. It's part of the Fansided Network, so I do a lot of Celtics work over there. If you want more like written Celtics stuff, I had a whole Delano Banton thing, because my God, people are just so bored nowadays and are trying to hype up guys like Delano Banton, and I was having none of that. So yeah, I'm excited. It's exciting. I love being part of CTW. I love the stuff I do with the Sports Wave, all this fun stuff. Just love being a part of the community and being able to talk your guys' ear off for close to an hour here.
All right back at you. So again, I'm going to have all of his links and all of his writing and all of his stuff in the description. Go check it out, because a lot of what they do is very similar to a lot of what we do. So again, they write a bunch of stuff. We're kind of Celtics basketball, they got a lot more to look at. So again, what they are doing is awesome, and it kind of matches our energy, what we got going on here at CTW. But guys, again, the playoffs are approaching, man. If you're not already, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go do that right now. Turn on post notifications. We're going to be live after every Celtics game for post-game live. Xavier will be there. I'll be there. We got the whole crew. It's going to be a lot of fun. We got a lot of fun stuff coming for you boys. If you're watching, if you're listening, wherever you might be, we appreciate it again for all the support we've been getting, guys. I'm Rob. Next to me is my man, Xavier, the X-Man. And guys, until next time, go Celtics, man.